Khaula, thank you so much for taking out the time and being with us on the Dastaangoi podcast. Um, I've heard so much about you. I've read so much about you. I follow you on your Instagram account and the stuff that you do. यार अगर आपको कोई सड़क पे बंदा मिले आज, how would you describe what you do?
Well, usually सड़क पे मुझे बहुत लोग मिलते हैं and I usually they ask me कि why do you want to talk to us and why do you want to engage with us, तो मैं कहती हूँ मैं तस्वीरें लेती हूँ. That's the simple answer. That's the simplest answer, but it's a lot more. I don't know how to really pin it down. I mean, I don't want to say I'm just a photographer.
Because you're not.
Because I'm not. I mean, photography is just a kind of a way to, get my thoughts or the story across. It's a method. It's not really
It's a medium.
who I am. Yeah, it's not just like a thing. So it's really hard. That's a difficult question to answer. Like, what am I? I guess storytellers kind of become so generic now. I mean, everyone is one, right? Because of social media and Instagram, everyone's telling stories. So I don't know. Actually, hopefully by the end of this conversation,
take it when it comes to thoughts and doing the work that you do, because I mean there's a huge range of work that you've done and you've started, right? Like from starting a jewelry brand to Humans of Karachi to the time that you've spent outside as well. Like how has that shaped what you do today? How has that shaped Khaula in this day and age, sitting in Karachi today, from the experiences that you've had across your life, from Parsons in New York to your time in the Middle East?
It's been quite the journey. I mean, I think everyone goes through these the years that they go through, and things change, and the world changes. Honestly, before I left Pakistan to go for my master's, there weren't any conversations or much stuff happening about identity. I feel like we were quite not part of a global dialogue in terms of identity. Social media ही नहीं था, and यहाँ पे, who do you interact with and really talk to when you're a teenager? At least 10 years, 20 years ago, the conversations were just not there.
Yeah.
You weren't looking inwards as such, I feel. And as soon as I went abroad, I was suddenly, it was the first time I was going. I mean, I didn't get a chance to go do my undergrad abroad, but I got a chance to do my master's. So I was like 25, and it was quite an eye-opener in the sense that I had a lot of identity suddenly attached to me. The minute you go there, I was in the class, everyone was white. So, and a few Koreans, that's it. That was my entire class. So I was Muslim, the only Muslim, and Pakistani, and there's just so many labels attached to me. I kind of saw myself differently, and then those conversations started happening with identity. So I guess when I moved back, I knew that I needed to do something to kind of show the world who we are, in the best way I could, like through my perspective and my lens, because there was a very single narrative out there about Pakistan.
Yeah.
I felt that in the 3 years I was there, and the people I interacted with, they just didn't know, because there wasn't much out there. उस वक्त तो Instagram was new, नया था, तो इतना किसी को कुछ ऐसे ब्लॉगर्स नहीं थे या इन्फ्लुएंसर्स नहीं थे या
मैं तो आर्ग्यू करूंगा कि आज तक अभी भी हमारा सिंगल माइंडेड सिंगल किस्म की नैरेटिव ही है. Like majority of the population outside of Pakistan still thinks of Pakistan as like this backward terrorist country.
लेकिन जो इंटरेस्टेड है एक डीपर अंडरस्टैंडिंग करने के लिए, if they go looking for something, they can still find it now through channels. उस वक्त वो भी नहीं था, because like I said, Instagram wasn't that popular. It wasn't really around. I mean, I joined maybe like 2015 or 14, pretty late in the game, but generally everyone was on Facebook, and there wasn't much else. But now at least there are all these platforms where you can go and you can search if you're genuinely interested. और अब तो इतने लोग आ रहे हैं और इतना ट्रैवल हो रहा था, एटलीस्ट इस साल से पहले तो हो रहा था. So unfortunately, but I think people who were interested in knowing more about Pakistan now have been able to connect. And that's kind of what I wanted to do once I moved back, which is 8 years ago now. I wanted to show that, you know, यहाँ पे एक normal life भी है, जो हम लोग उन्हीं की तरह, you know, बिल्कुल उनकी तरह नहीं, लेकिन कुछ कुछ उनकी तरह रहते हैं. We do things our way. And you know, it's not all about terrorism and you know, being labeled as the fourth most unlivable country
Yeah.
or city, Karachi, in the world. I mean, I just wanted to kind of combat those narratives in whatever way I could.
Khala, what I'm really interested in is something that you said while you were describing your experience in New York, and how all of a sudden identity became something that, you know, normally अगर आप पाकिस्तान में रह रहे हैं, आप majority of the time पाकिस्तानी से मिल रहे हैं, majority of the time, like, you know, you have similar experiences, and then when you're put out all of a sudden and you're labeled as this one person, oh, you're brown, oh, you're Pakistani, oh, you're Muslim, and all of these different things. Did that help you? I mean, for me, when I moved to Canada, it was a massive shock. It was a culture shock on like so many different levels, coming from living in Dubai to going to Canada. Like just everything was a shock, from, you know, doing everything yourself to having to go outside and meet people and people from different backgrounds. All of a sudden, you go into a system where uh, it's very different. Like you start to realize the things that are, you know, hidden away that you don't get to interact with in the Middle East. And so for me, was a shock. But when you're in New York and you're talking to these people and you're outside of the comfort zone of what the normal identity is for Pakistan, did that help you build up your own identity of who Khawla is? What was the evolution of that? Because like when I look at it from myself, I always say, I mean, I was born and raised here, but I think my personality, and I'm so glad for it, was formed in Canada. Because you you're taken out of this bubble, right? Like if you stay in this bubble, I've seen what happens in this bubble. It's scary. But my formative years, I was outside, so I wasn't in this little bubble. But how was, like, I'd be curious to kind of, and I'm sure that a lot of people would disagree with me, Joe, you know, that have this perspective. But for me, at least, my truth is that the formative years, I was outside of the UAE and of Pakistan. So I'd really be curious to hear your perspective on this.
I think in Pakistan, most of us from our kind of backgrounds do have a kind of sheltered and privileged, you know, upbringing. So a lot of the times we don't have perhaps the freedom to do or explore or push our boundaries. You know, I mean, there are always limits, whether it's moral conduct or any kind of social conduct. There are all these people and, you know, family, and you kind of know everyone in your social school circle, and 6 degrees of separation. So you're always a little wary of, you know, your behavior, perhaps, you know. And when you go abroad, all of that is kind of freedom. You know, you can discover who you are, like you said, right? So that is actually the time when you can just see who you are. A lot of people experiment with all kinds of things, you know, whether it's clothes or whether it's, you know, their social interactions, to see if they like that and if they connect with that, if that's who they are. And if that's who they are, then they discover that this is who they are, and they've been, you know, kind of holding back all their years in Pakistan, and you know that happens. So, you know, I kind of had a similar, you know, kind of trajectory, I guess, where I went and I was seeing what I could do. But, you know, I came back and I kind of changed from who I was in New York. And like, I kind of understood that I have certain ideologies, and I have like certain conservative ideas also. So, and I have strong opinions about certain things. So, yeah, it did um, show me that I could do a lot more. I could push the boundaries. But then I realized when I came back that I didn't want to, it wasn't me. You know what I mean?
I I do, but like one thing that like I want to focus here on is when you go and you
Hmm.
see the way the world perceives identity, and especially in the work that you do, for instance, the journalistic photography work that you do, it opens different barriers, right, of how you look at things. And I think
Yeah,
when you came back to Pakistan, and we see that, and like I can see that as soon as you put out a work, or when you do a coverage trip, for instance, which I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about, the trips that you do take. You do it in a very open way, in a very different way to, for instance, um, a journalist or a storyteller or a photographer would, had they not gone out and seen a different perspective on how stories are told, on how people interact with each other. Because sometimes people are conserved, like they do not want to interact with people because you're not able to make people comfortable. But that's not about you being different from them. It's just about knowing how to approach a conversation, and to
right.
make the other person feel comfortable. And a lot of the times, I think we grow into that when we are put out, um,
Yeah.
of our norm, which is the reason I asked that question.
I mean, yeah, exactly. See, that's because I feel like we see how others see us through
Exactly.
different
Yes.
lens, you know?
Yes. There's that
Yeah,
other. Yeah.
exactly. And when you travel, you get to see a lot of that. Like, how are they perceiving you? How are you perceiving them? And I think the idea of looking at yourself through the lenses of, varying lenses, whether it's America or Europe or anywhere else, that's always interesting. And that kind of I then your own work is influenced by that, because then you want the authentic as you can get. Ab authentic bhi bahut variable hai.
Variable
What's
hota hai, ji.
authentic, it may not be authentic to me, because there's a lot of like it's very complex actually. So yeah, I think traveling really does that. Moving away and living somewhere else does that even more so, because you're actually in that culture and you're really looking at yourself through their eyes, and with new eyes, fresh eyes inwards. So that experience, that really helped. But like I said, I came back and um, there were a lot of things that I was looking, really, really looking inwards. And, I felt like I was a completely different person when I left Pakistan. I was a completely different person while I was in New York. And I was a very different person when I moved back, you
And I'm
know?
sure you're even more different now, 8 years later.
Of course, I mean, it's been almost a decade since I got back. So there have been, uh, you know, everyone evolves. I think
So,
everyone evolves every couple of years. For me, I've noticed that it's every 4 years. I've actually formed, like, made this, identified a pattern.
framework bana liya na apna ke Khawla, is
I was reading something interesting online, and it had something to do with this. So I was like, okay, let's see, let's chart my own path and see how I like what I've changed. And I noticed every 4 years, I'm a different person, a little different. I mean, a lot different, but yeah. I mean,
that's
I feel
all.
like my way of thinking changes, evolves, and somehow it turned out to be every 4 years. I would recommend everyone try this out. Go back and
Map
see
out,
everything, map out your
map
journey,
out your
and
journey. Yeah.
see what happened, what
So,
happens. And
Khala, let's get to today, and the work that you do, and not just around Karachi, but the assignments that you go on. How do you, like? I'd be curious. How do you pick projects that you want to take? Um, how do you look at them through your lens? And I'm sure that you now have built a lens of, this is how I look at things, and this is how I report, or how I see the world from, or how I see Karachi, or how I see Pakistan. And second, Shit, second, I'd just like to hear about one of the journeys that you've taken because I am extremely curious about the road trips and the places that you go and the stories that you tell.
I don't know which one to really pick and talk about at this point. A lot of it is work. It's commissioned projects I get because I'm a photojournalist. So I get commissioned by a lot of international development organizations to go look at their projects and then write stories about them or make videos or photo essays and so I get to see a lot. And whenever I go on these trips, they're usually to interior parts of the country where one wouldn't normally go for just simply tourism because they're far out, they're difficult, there's often not much there. But there always is something there, like some landmark or some historical
Yeah.
thing, which I really like to check out during my travels. So I always, make a little detour, or if I get done early, I go to, see if there's some bazaar around or some historical site. I mean, like Sindh is literally the province of the
Scattered. Yeah.
Sufis, so there's
Yeah.
always like stuff there. So basically, when I go to the off-road, assignment, हट के जब मैं जाती हूँ, that's when I actually discover things and I write down from a community perspective, because simply just going to a project, talking to people for a day and then writing is not completely enough. I like to get a sense of the whole place. So that's part of the journey for me, to get a to get a wholesome look of
Perspective
what
of the
a
place
wholesome
and really be able to
perspective
say to tell the truth.
from different ways, because usually it's a very time restraint constricted assignment. I mean, we have to be on the road, there's a lot of traveling involved, like a lot of driving, so then the actual time to do the work is very little. So that is the thing that when we get done, then I'd like to just go and either talk to them off the record and just get a little sense of everything. Uh, Sometimes the assignments are really open ended. Like, for example, the Kalash project, that was super open ended. They just said, go to Kalash and find something, anything, So when it came to that, that was really exciting because I could do anything over there. And I was just really curious about what young people are doing. What are the young Kalashas doing? What do they think of, their ancient culture? And I just followed that curiosity then, and what turned out to be was the feature article, "The Tomorrow Boy of Kalash," which was published in summer. So I think curiosities really drive me, really drive the story. And like you, I also research a place before going to see कि आसपास क्या है और मैं क्या कर सकती हूँ और क्या देख सकती हूँ. Like, for example, I had to go on assignment last year to Bhong. I'd never even heard of Bhong
I haven't heard of
at
Bong.
that point. Yeah, it's a place near Rahim Yar Khan in
Okay.
Punjab. So I never heard of it either, and it was this such a strange name and never heard of it. And I was like, why haven't I not heard of it? So then I Googled and I was like, what is there? And there was honestly not much there, nothing there except for one mosque. And Ahmad, oh my God, when I saw that mosque, I couldn't believe that this mosque was, so unheard of. It's stunning. It was, it's won the Aga Khan Award in 1983 for
What?
architecture. Yeah. And I was like, what? I mean, I have to go there. And when I went there on assignment, I just told my clients that, like, you know what, at some point we have to go to this mosque. And it was amazing. It was this massive mosque. You'll have to Google. I would recommend everyone just Google it and have a look at it. I mean, there are these gems, honestly, hidden and unknown still in like lots of parts of Pakistan. So yeah, again, curiosities, I think, drive the story or the pursuit of story in the work, whether it's professional or personal. That's what I feel makes it more authentic, most authentic.
That's awesome. I completely agree with you on the curiosity element and on the research element. Yeah, well, I would be curious to kind of hear your perspective on is also, I mean, with the advent of social media, uh, there are more and more people, and also with the advent of better roads in Pakistan, there are more and more people that are going and exploring and seeing places and talking about places. How have you seen the evolution of people, one, going to places? I mean, I would assume you would have a different perspective on this as well, because as, let's say, as tourism evolves, or as the ability and mobility, as mobility evolves, and you're able to kind of go to other places, whether for tourism, work, whatever, there needs to be a certain awareness and a certain respect to the vicinity that you are going in, right? Like, I've been to Chitral, been to Hunza, and all these other places, and then you see garbage, or then you see like people disrespecting the culture or the peoples. Have you seen people or institutions or people or NGOs working around getting more, um, I wouldn't say realization, but more awareness around the fact that we are a country of, so many different cultures and so many different religions and so many different peoples, being respectful to that? Like, do you see that? Because that's also a form of storytelling, and a form that you see with some people when they go to tell stories about a certain place, right? Like, have you seen that evolve in Pakistan, or no?
I wouldn't know about NGOs specifically doing something like this for awareness, because NGOs and organizations tend to work on, um, more specific immediate needs
Projects,
of
yeah.
the community, like pani nahi aa raha hai, ya, uh, there's food security issues, things like that, or health security. No one really focuses solely on environment or aesthetics, or teaching people how to behave. It's mostly, I've seen individuals who travel frequently, uh, who use their platforms to talk about this, like influential people also, like people like actors and actresses, or proper
Yeah.
travel bloggers. They use their platforms and they have like huge followings, and hopefully people do listen to them, although I don't know how many people actually, the ones who are doing this, I don't know if they're actually following or listening to people, because like just recently Adnan Malik posted
I
about
saw that. That's what I was going to
crash.
mention. It gets such a beautiful post.
Yeah, and they were like कि एक school आया था और ये करने का. अब school going kids doing this, I really don't know how to make someone stop this. I was in Nathia Gali last year, and there's this mountain that you can climb. It was obviously snow-covered mountain, and they give you these socks to wear over your shoes, so that non-slip socks apparently. Although there's not really much, the socks do, but they're standing out there selling the socks. And there is this railing, and on the other side, if you look, it's like a heap of socks all out of the
I have a feeling I
mountain.
know
Because
where this is.
they take off the socks and they chuck them. Obviously, they're not going to give them back to the people who are selling them, and people who are selling them just chuck them on the other side of the railing. So I was just like, God, just look at all this trash. एक डस्टबिन भी नहीं रखी है. So I don't understand. It's like डस्टबिन रख कर भी जाओ ना, उसमें फिर भी कोई नहीं फेंकेगा.
It'll be
So I
like
don't.
बाहर रखा होगा उसके, अंदर नहीं
हाँ,
होगा.
हाँ, या overflow हो रहा होगा, which is kind of the issue in Karachi के overflow हो रहा होता है. लेकिन वो, so there is no organization, or there's no like proper messaging out there for not littering, or there's nothing. I feel like nothing creative has been done. It's a big scope. Then yeah, you can do. अभी जैसे Fasi Zaka and Zishan Parvez have done such amazing messaging for Corona. Very, very fun, edgy stuff about wearing a mask or 6 feet dur khade hona. You have to watch them.
I
They're
haven't
really
seen them
fun,
yet.
really fun messaging. Very culturally, catchy and appropriate. So I was just thinking nothing has been done about littering or, not throwing trash or being sensible or common sense. ऐसे नहीं हुआ है. But there
It's
is
such
a market for it.
it's such an important thing, and I mean, and the reason why I asked this was because of Adnan Malik's post. Like I saw it, and like like you scroll and you see, and like, oh my god, man.
One thing I did see when we went to Kalash, we were handed out pamphlets of how to behave with Kalashas. So that I thought was very interesting because they're so sick of people coming and just walking in and taking pictures of them. So there was actually this leaflet we got, don't take pictures with like proper pictorials. And we got this upon entering the valley,
Awesome.
because there's like a check post and you enter and they check to see if everyone's Pakistani because you have to, declare if you're foreign and then, I don't know, pay some fee. So we were all Pakistani, so they just gave us this leaflet. So that is like a step taken to, kind of control behavior or, you know, ढंग का बनाए लोगों को कि वो सीधे आके तस्वीरें ना ले लें लोगों की, which is very rude.
I agree. Khaula, एक और चीज I'd be curious to kind of hear about would be the experience that you had with Humans of Karachi. What are some unexpected कहानियां और लोग जिनको आप मिली हो that came out of that?
Humans of Karachi अब तो खैर खत्म हो गया है. I mean, I don't do it anymore. It's like a non-functional page. I can't bring myself to do it actually anymore because times have changed so much. And I will come to that later. But when it started out, it was just so pure, simple, going out on the street. I actually would just, I started it with Kamran Bhai, who used to work with me at the Citizens Archive of Pakistan when I used to work there. So we started out, we would just pick a place, literally just sit in the car and we'd be like, Aaj kahan jana hai? And he'd be like, us taraf chalte hain, because he's more aware about the halat of the place and, the city. And he'd be like, nahi, us aaj nahi jana, itna dur aaj nahi jate, wahan pe traffic hoga. So, I would kind of go with him. So we would just pick a place and we would go. And everything was totally found spontaneously, and that was the fun part. Like, you never knew what you would find, like whether it was the sweeper at, the zoo who could speak in perfect English. And he told us that he used to cook for dignitaries back in like the 50s and the 40s. And he knew, he's met the Russian ambassador, this Italian ambassador, and he's cooked for all of them. And he was like, now he's a sweeper at the zoo because he's like, it's less stressful and that era has gone. And so, I mean, it was so wonderful stumbling upon these stories. Ek to ye tha. Then there was some theater actor we bumped into on the street and he started doing a random performance for us. बहुत से ऐसे हैं. We walked in on Holi happening at a mandir. And even we got invited to Christmas in Korangi ki patli patli galiyan, aur wahan pe they'd set up, pure biblical scenes from like ghar ki cheezein. It was just so super creative, and we were literally invited like a night before because we ran into the guy and he was searching for a Christmas hat in like this big drum and I don't know, it was some lighthouse market. It was like a market for like old clothes. So he was searching for something and I just walked up to him and I'm like, aap kya dhoond rahe hain itne der se? And he was like, a Christmas hat dhoond raha. So we helped him look for it. We eventually found it and he's like, okay, thank you. And I invite you. He was a pastor. So he's like, I invite you to come over to my, gali Kurangi mein bataya kaun sa. Aur jab hum log pahunch gaye. So it was an amazing many years, actually 5 6 7 years that we did that, spontaneous. And then everything changed, kind of, the Humans of project worldwide kind of changed, and it became more about getting the most painful story or that would go viral, or the most like elaborate, it became about hunting stories and gathering them pehle se to ensure virality. And wo mujhse, I couldn't justify that to myself. I didn't want that to be what I do, you know, using people's stories to go viral or
Yeah,
create like this elaborate organization that just, hunts down people's trauma or stories to, put online. Uh, I just, I don't know, it just doesn't sit too well with me. And there might not be anything wrong with it, not saying that there is, but, एक gut होता
of
है
course.
जो आप follow करते हो, और अगर कुछ सही नहीं लगता, then I don't tend to do it,
100%.
So,
I mean, I didn't know that that was the evolution of the Humans Project. Like, I mean, this.
well, I mean, it's my analysis of it from what I've seen. You know, it became less about finding spontaneous stories on the street and a lot about curating and getting people to come to you, which kind of wasn't the fun part of doing the project. And and everyone is doing that now, like you see various platforms saying, send us your stories,
Yeah.
or send us your thing. And that's fine for that. But for me, Humans of Karachi was never about that. Like, I didn't, once in a while, yeah, sure, if someone had inboxed me their story, if I found it interesting, I'd go and meet them and, talk about it. But it, it was always like what Brandon's initial idea was. Brandon Stanton, the Humans of New York guy, his initial idea was like going on various streets and finding whatever was there by chance. And I found that,
Serendipity of it all.
yeah, I found that really beautiful. And it was, that was fun. Yeah. And now, though, I mean, I would still do that, uh, but I don't think Humans of Karachi is like the page for it now. I think it's more like if I had to stick with the format the world is following, this kind of spontaneity doesn't really cut it for a Humans project. It's just something I do on my own, which
For
is.
sure.
And then there's this pressure you feel like every story has to go viral. So it has to, like, tear you apart or, really shake your core,
What you're
it has to
describing is just taking away the authenticity of why it was started, right? When something
for
gets.
me, that was the case. It might not, it might be the evolution of the project where it was meant to be. I mean, I see Humans of Bombay stories and they're all hard hitting. And they have like a team of 13 people or something working, to get these stories, full-time paid workers. So that's really something else, as is Human of New York now. And if that's the way all Humans of Project are supposed to kind of function now, I don't think I have the personality for that.
Of course. Khala, I'd be curious, yet, what are the stories that you grew up with, Karachi mein? What are some stories that your parents or your grandparents would tell you, or what are the things that resonate most, that brought you back as well, that, that continue on with you, that you're going to share with?
It didn't bring me back. What brought me back was the fact that I was on a Fulbright and I had to come back to Pakistan, uh, whether I wanted to or not.
Yeah.
But Karachi, my father, he's like a treasure trove of Karachi nostalgia. You'll find him on all the Karachi Facebook pages that talk about nostalgia. He'll be the most, the conversation starter and the top fan of those pages because he has so many stories. So whenever we used to leave the house, even to go somewhere, like Eid visits mostly when we would go dur dur, my father would have a story from every corner of every tree that we used to cross. कि मैं यहाँ पे ये करता था, मैं वहाँ पे वो करता था, हम लोग यहाँ पे ये करते थे, वहाँ पे हैप्पी होम स्कूल में मेरा ये दोस्त होता था, उसकी बहन वहाँ रहती है. Everything, anything.
He has a
One card,
pulse.
and there would be like a million stories. So cinema ऐसा होता था. Like my father, he acts in dramas as a hobby. So he used to do that, like, even during his banking days. So he has a lot of like trivia of cinema from the 60s,
Yeah.
because he was like a crazy Wahid Murad fan. So a lot about his life, and you know, this song was shot over here in this gully. He is like my Karachi, go-to person for any Karachi story of yesteryear. So that's that's what I've grown up with. Lots of music from the 60s and 50s, Wahid Murad basically stuff.
Wahid Murad. Yeah, and
Cinema and
also I'm also curious to hear about. I might be mistaken, but I think it was your grandfather or your great grandfather who had no, your grandfather. It can't be your great grandfather who wrote
who?
the national anthem.
No, it's not the national anthem. It's Jeeve Jeeve Pakistan.
GVG, sorry, GVG Pakistan.
Second
Why am I?
national anthem, I
Yes.
guess. Second to the national anthem. Yes, he wrote that. He wrote that. Yeah.
And how? I mean, did you get to hear the story behind how that happened and where that kind of came from?
Yes, actually, when I was working at Citizens Archive of Pakistan, I actually told him that he needs to kind of record it for us officially so that we can put it in the country's archives. And he basically said that it was in 1965, I believe he wrote it. So well after independence. But he was like, everyone was saying GA Sindh, GA Punjab, you know, he was like, nobody was saying Pakistan. And he was very patriotic. Like he left India, he migrated to come to Pakistan. He was from Loharu, a princely state called Loharu. So he was, very, very invested in, Pakistan being one whole, unified country. So these naras of GSN and separate provinces really bothered him. So he wrote Jeeve Jeeve Pakistan,
I
and he
love it.
recited it the first time in London. The tune is a little different from what we hear. And when he sings it, it's really it's a bit different, And he had a beautiful voice also. And you can actually Google the Citizens Archive thing, and you can see his own recitation of it. So when he recited it for the first time in London, everyone who was there on a crowded street, they like lifted him up on their shoulders, and that's what he says. And he like they carried him down the street, and we're like, that must have been quite a sight.
That's awesome. It's also very interesting to hear the perspective of, like I didn't think of people were saying Jeevis and Jeevit things. Like here, you're
Yeah.
unifying everyone. It's beautiful. Khaula, last question for you would be, if when you went to New York or when you meet anyone, how do you unpack Pakistan for them?
How did I unpack
How
Pakistan?
do
Oh,
you
I was.
if how do you get them to
Now,
come to Pakistan now as well? Yeah, now.
how do I get them to come to Pakistan?
Not come to Pakistan. Sorry, I asked the question wrong. I think my nieces are screaming, and I'm going somewhere else. How do you describe Pakistan? How do you unpack Pakistan for someone who's never been to Pakistan?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question. I make them listen to the music, actually, a lot of the times. And, Coke Studios actually really help with that.
Yeah.
They get really curious once I make them listen to, I show them a couple of videos of, Coke Studio. And then I start describing Karachi because, I'm from here. And they've heard some things about Karachi. So, I start describing that. I just start describing the languages, just the fact that we speak so many languages here. And I start giving them this idea of, the fact that this place is so complex and layered, and I show them like how we dress in different provinces. So,
Which is
it's literally like five little countries in one country.
100%. It's incredible.
The diversity. I think I love talking about the diversity of Pakistan. I feel like that is something that we don't celebrate enough. I mean, we get caught up in the differences, but it's these differences, honestly, that make us
Yeah.
so. It's
It makes
the
us
selling
unique. It makes us who we are. This is what we should celebrate.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. like ये भी है और ये भी है और देखो हमारे like dances भी इस तरह से हैं और हम लोग ये भी होता है and our food is this and mountains and I mean literally there's just so much to talk about. I you know and with the right audience they're like really sold on coming
I
be
love
like
it. And what you said about Coke Studios is actually really important. I think what they've been able to do with Coke Studios is remarkable, bringing
yeah.
people from all ages back, and
Exactly. I
hit
mean,
the
there's so
nostalgia and
much
the contemporary.
there's so much like criticism about Coke Studio as well. I mean, वो तो हर चीज के बारे में होता है, but honestly, Coke Studio and Nescafe Basement have done such, so a great service to, music and just taking culture, Pakistani culture global
Yeah.
that um, I think it really deserves its due credit for
Listen, you can
that.
be sitting in a restaurant in New York. You can be sitting in a restaurant in Paris, and if it's a Pakistani or Indian restaurant, it will have Coke Studio in it.
I love that.
On repeat, and it's just this little moment of familiarity. And then when you talk to the younger generation, to the older generation, like everything, people are able to relate. So I think it's a beautiful initiative. Like, I mean, I'm sure that the hardcore musicians have their issues. I mean, people always tend to find them, but I
Yeah,
think it's a
yeah, of
beautiful,
course.
beautiful initiative. Khaula, thank you so much for taking out the time. If I could, I know that we could go on for hours because I want to unpack a lot of the stories that you've been like posting about and sharing. Because with the work that you do is absolutely amazing. I really encourage people to go and kind of look at what you've done and what you continue on doing and the journey. I love the fact that you document the journey, not just the end product. It's like like you're going on this
That's
little.
the fun part.
Yeah.
you know that's the fun part, and honestly I do it more for myself than for an audience, and I think that also, coming back to your authenticity question, I think if you do it for yourself, you'll really do it in an honest way. I mean, if you do it for the hits or the likes or the you know engagement, I feel like you're performing then,
Yeah.
and that becomes a little bit of a problem you know
100%. Khaula, thank you so much for
Thank
taking out the time.